The moment Brad said, "Sir, I don't think your budget fits these models. Maybe you should check another dealership," Chen quietly slipped out a business card. The Apex Motors logo, under it the title Global Innovation Director. As the card dropped into Brad's hand, the next 30 seconds unraveled into chaos. Brad's face turning ash gray, the showroom manager rushing out of his office, the other sales reps frozen in place, and the security footage exploding across social media that very night. What began as a simple sales interaction became a historic disaster, where corporate bias cost millions and a career was erased in seconds. Before the story starts, drop a comment. Which city are you watching from? And if you stand for justice and equality, share this story and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can make our voices stronger. The Los Angeles sun blazed through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of Apex Motors' flagship showroom on Wilshire Boulevard, illuminating millions of dollars worth of automotive engineering arranged like sculpture in a gallery. Chen pushed through the heavy glass doors, the cool air conditioning a welcome relief from the September heat outside. At 39, David had spent his entire adult life immersed in automotive innovation. MIT electrical engineering degree, 8 years at Tesla working on battery technology, and for the past 5 years, he'd served as Apex Motors' Global Innovation Director, overseeing a $2.3 billion research and development budget that had transformed the company from a traditional luxury brand into an electric vehicle powerhouse. The car displayed prominently in the showroom's center, the Apex E-Titan, a gleaming silver electric SUV with revolutionary solid-state battery technology, was essentially David's brainchild. He'd led the team that designed its propulsion system, overseen the development of its autonomous driving features, and spent countless nights perfecting the regenerative braking that gave it a 400-mile range. The vehicle represented 4 years of his life and some of the most advanced automotive engineering on the planet. But today, David wasn't here as the Global Innovation Director. He was here as a customer, finally ready to purchase the car he'd helped create. He deliberately dressed casually, jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and sneakers, wanting to experience the showroom as any regular buyer would, to see if the sales staff understood and could articulate the technology that made the E-Titan revolutionary. The showroom floor gleamed with polished white marble, and a dozen luxury vehicles sat on rotating platforms under carefully designed lighting. Sales consultants in sharp suits moved between displays, tablets in hand, ready to guide wealthy clients through purchases that often exceeded $150,000. David approached the E-Titan, running his hand along the hood with the pride of a parent seeing their child graduate. Every curve, every aerodynamic detail had been tested in wind tunnels and simulations. The car was a masterpiece, and he couldn't wait to finally own one. "Excuse me," David said to a passing sales consultant, a tall white man in his early 30s whose name tag read Brad Morrison. "I'd like to learn more about the E-Titan. I'm interested in purchasing one." Brad barely glanced at David before his eyes slid past him to a white couple examining a different vehicle across the showroom. "I'll be with you in a moment, sir," Brad said dismissively, already walking away toward the other customers. David waited, understanding that sales staff naturally gravitated toward whoever looked most likely to make a purchase. He pulled out his phone and began reviewing the E-Titan specs on the Apex website, noting with satisfaction that early customer reviews were overwhelmingly positive. 10 minutes passed. Brad was deep in conversation with the white couple, laughing at their jokes, offering them bottles of premium water from a nearby refreshment station. Another sales consultant, a young woman named Jennifer, approached a white businessman who'd just entered, immediately engaging him in enthusiastic discussion about the latest models. David raised his hand slightly, trying to catch Brad's attention. The sales consultant looked directly at him, then deliberately turned back to his customers as if David hadn't existed. 15 minutes. David walked around the E-Titan, examining details he'd personally engineered. The flush door handles that extended when the key fob approached, the panoramic glass roof with electrochromic dimming, the subtle air intakes that optimized battery cooling. He could have given a better sales presentation than anyone in this room, but apparently, he couldn't get anyone to talk to him. Finally, Brad finished with the white couple and approached David, his expression hovering between impatience and barely concealed annoyance. "Sir, I'm sorry for the wait. How can I help you?" Brad's tone suggested helping David was the last thing he wanted to do. "I'm interested in the E-Titan," David said, keeping his voice pleasant. "Specifically, I'd like to know about the battery technology and the autonomous driving features." Brad's eyebrows rose slightly. "The E-Titan is our premium electric vehicle. It starts at $185,000 for the base model. Are you familiar with our financing options?" The implication was clear. Brad doubted David could afford the vehicle and was already steering him toward payment plans before even discussing the car itself. "I'm planning to pay cash," David replied calmly. "But first, I'd like to understand the technical specifications. Can you explain the solid-state battery system?" Brad shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Well, it's electric. Very efficient. Great range. You know, if price is a concern, we have the Apex Esports starting at $78,000. That might be more in your range." David felt the familiar sting of assumption, the instant judgment based on his appearance and ethnicity. Brad had looked at his Asian features, his casual clothing, and decided he belonged in the cheaper vehicles, not examining the flagship model. "I'm not concerned about price," David said, his voice steady. "I'm concerned about understanding the technology. For instance, what's the peak power output of the dual-motor system?" Brad blinked, clearly not expecting technical questions. I'd have to check the brochure for exact numbers. But it's very powerful. Lots of horsepower. And the autonomous driving capabilities? What level of automation does it achieve?" "It's got all the latest self-driving stuff," Brad said vaguely, his impatience growing. "Look, sir, this is a very advanced, very expensive vehicle. Maybe you'd be more comfortable looking at our entry-level models? We have excellent used inventory as well." The dismissal was now explicit. Brad was actively trying to move David away from the E-Titan, steering him toward cheaper alternatives without any assessment of his actual needs or budget. "I'm specifically interested in this model," David said, his patience wearing thin. "I've done my research. I know exactly what I want." Brad's expression hardened. "Sir, I'm trying to be helpful here. The E-Titan is $185,000. That's before taxes, registration, and any additional options. Realistically, you're looking at over $200,000 out the door. I don't want you to waste your time on something that's not in your budget range." Other customers in the showroom were starting to notice the interaction. Jennifer glanced over with a frown. A silver-haired man examining an Apex sedan paused to watch. "How do you know what my budget range is?" David asked quietly. Brad's face flushed slightly. "I'm just trying to manage expectations. We get a lot of people who come in to look at our premium models, but aren't serious buyers. I need to focus on customers who are actually ready to purchase." The barely concealed subtext was deafening. People who looked like David weren't serious buyers, weren't worth his time, didn't belong in a luxury automotive showroom. David reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Plain white cardstock with the Apex Motors logo in the upper left corner. Clean typography spelling out his name and title, David Chen, Global Innovation Director, Apex Motors Corporation. He held it out to Brad, who took it reflexively. David watched the sales consultant's eyes move across the text, seeing the exact moment comprehension hit. Brad's face went from annoyed superiority to ashen horror in less than a second. "You're..." Brad's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "You're Global Innovation Director." "I am," David confirmed. "I oversee all research and development for Apex Motors. I led the team that designed the E-Titan. The solid-state battery system you couldn't explain? I spent 3 years developing it. The autonomous driving features you called self-driving stuff? I wrote the specifications for those systems." Brad's hand holding the business card began to tremble. Behind him, Jennifer had frozen mid-sentence with her customer. The showroom manager, Michael Torres, emerged from his office, clearly sensing something had gone catastrophically wrong. "Mr. Chen," Brad stammered, "I didn't know. I wasn't aware." "You weren't aware because you didn't ask," David said, his voice still calm but carrying steel now. "You took one look at me and decided I couldn't afford this vehicle. You dismissed my questions, suggested I look at cheaper alternatives, and actively tried to move me away from the car I came here to purchase." Michael Torres approached rapidly, his face pale as he recognized David from countless corporate meetings and presentations. "Mr. Chen, I apologize. I had no idea you were visiting our showroom today. If you'd known, I would have been treated differently," David interrupted. "But the point isn't how you treat executives you recognize. The point is how you treat every customer who walks through that door." He turned back to Brad, who looked like he might be sick. "I came here as a regular customer specifically to see how your sales staff performs. I wanted to know if they understood the technology they're selling, if they could communicate the value proposition to buyers, if they provided excellent service to everyone." David gestured around the showroom. "In the past 30 minutes, I've watched you ignore me while attending to white customers immediately. I've watched you make assumptions about my budget based on my appearance. I've watched you try to steer me away from the vehicle I designed because you decided I didn't belong here." Other customers were openly watching now, phones emerging from pockets. David could see the red recording indicators, could imagine the videos already being trimmed and captioned for social media. "The worst part," David continued, "isn't that you treated me badly. It's that you have no idea how many other customers you've treated the same way. How many Asian buyers, Black buyers, Latino buyers walked in here and were immediately dismissed. How many brilliant engineers, successful entrepreneurs, wealthy professionals were judged by their appearance instead of their actual purchasing power." Brad opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? Michael Torres was on his phone now, speaking rapidly in a low voice. Probably calling corporate headquarters, alerting them to a crisis that was already spiraling out of control. "Mr. Chen, please," Michael said desperately. "Let us make this right. The E-Titan is yours, no charge. Any options you want, completely complimentary. Brad will be immediately." "I don't want a free car," David cut him off. "I wanted to buy a car. There's a difference. I wanted to have a normal customer experience, to be treated with basic respect, to purchase the vehicle my team and I spent years developing." He looked at Brad again. "You cost your company a sale today. But more than that, you cost Apex Motors something more valuable, trust. How many potential customers will see videos of this interaction and decide they'd rather buy from a competitor who treats them with dignity?" Jennifer, the other sales consultant, spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry this happened. It doesn't represent, doesn't it?" David asked, not unkindly. "I watched you immediately engage with a white customer while I stood here waiting. I'm not saying you're overtly racist, but I am saying you've been trained, consciously or unconsciously, to prioritize certain customers over others based on appearance." He addressed the small crowd that had gathered. "This isn't about ruining one person's career. This is about exposing a systemic problem in luxury retail. The assumption that wealth, knowledge, and purchasing power look a certain way." Michael Torres's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at the screen, and his face went even paler. "That's our CEO," he said quietly. "She's seen the videos. They're already online." Of course they were. In 2024, every confrontation was potential viral content, and this scene had all the elements: corporate executive, luxury goods, obvious discrimination, and dramatic revelation. By tomorrow, it would have millions of views. "Mr. Chen," Michael tried again. "What can we do to make this right?" David considered for a moment. "Fire Brad. That's what everyone expects. But that's just treating a symptom. What I want is systematic change." He pulled out his phone, opening his notes app. "First, comprehensive bias training for all sales staff, conducted by external civil rights organizations. Second, mystery shopper programs with diverse participants to regularly audit customer service. Third, Revise commission structures that don't incentivize sales staff to prejudge which customers are worth their time. Fourth, transparent reporting on customer satisfaction broken down by demographic data. Michael nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely. All of it. We'll implement everything immediately. And fifth, David continued, I want Brad to be part of developing the training program. I want him to be honest about his assumptions, about what he was taught and what he learned, so other salespeople can recognize the same biases in themselves. Brad looked up with surprise and something that might have been gratitude. Mr. Chen, I thank you. I don't deserve. You don't, David agreed. But meaningful change requires more than punishment. It requires people willing to acknowledge their mistakes and help prevent others from making them. He turned to address everyone in the showroom, staff and customers alike. This happens every day in luxury retail, in fine dining, in exclusive hotels. People of color, people who dress casually, people who don't fit narrow stereotypes of wealth are dismissed and disrespected. Today you saw it exposed. Tomorrow, I expect to see it addressed. David pocketed his business card and headed toward the door. As he reached it, he turned back one final time. By the way, I still want to buy an E-Titan, but I'll purchase it from the San Francisco dealership. I hear their staff actually understands customer service. The videos went viral within hours, over 8 million views across platforms by morning. Apex Motors stock dipped initially but recovered as the CEO announced comprehensive reforms that exceeded even David's demands. Brad Morrison wasn't fired but became the face of the company's new Assumptions Cost Sales training program, traveling to dealerships nationwide to share his story. Most importantly, the incident sparked industry-wide examination of bias in luxury sales. 6 major automotive brands announced similar reforms within a week, and customer satisfaction scores among minority buyers began climbing for the first time in years. David eventually purchased his E-Titan from the San Francisco dealership, where the sales consultant, a young black woman named Keisha, asked intelligent questions about the technology and treated him with the respect every customer deserved. And every time he drove the vehicle he'd helped design, David thought about the power of exposure, accountability, and the simple dignity of being treated as a valued customer regardless of how you looked or what assumptions people made at first glance. Sometimes justice required calling out injustice publicly. Sometimes change required forcing comfortable people to confront uncomfortable truths. And sometimes the best way to fix a broken system was to expose exactly how it failed, then demand it do better.